Welcome to the future, where the glass is half full and you'll need new glasses, where you'll be jumping from conclusions.
The past is annulled, and a new future is born.
Never before in history has so much meant so little to so many. AD on the radio.
So this morning, 17 years ago, I was living in New York City. I wasn't a boy anymore, but I wasn't quite yet a man. The moment I woke up and saw plumes of smoke where the twin towers of the World Trade Center had stood, like the rest of New York City, like the rest of America, like the rest of the world, much if not all of my innocence ceased to exist. I don't know if you lived in New York City, or if you've ever lived in New York City, or if maybe you were in New York City at the time. But we lived in fear. We lived in darkness, as the scope of the death, loss, devastation, as all this became clear to us, grief rolled over us in waves. It was amazing. I remember everyone wanting to help. Everyone wanting to help, everyone wanting to volunteer. Ambulances, hospitals, on high alert, ready to do whatever it took to help survivors. And for those that were in the buildings, there wasn't survival. We all felt powerless in the face of it all when it happened. And then, as the waves of grief abated, anger took their place. A burning anger, a desire for justice and retribution, if that's what it took to get that justice. But you know, that was one of the toughest parts about it. The retribution, the justice, the response that we sought, it wouldn't come for years. Those were feelings that we had to deal with. Those are feelings that we had to squash down. Those are feelings that we had to learn about in an effort to not allow them to consume us. We must never forget the attacks of September 11th. We must always honor those that we lost. We must always honor those that gave all in the service of others. We must never allow those who would commit acts of terror to go unpunished. But in recent years, I found that I'm also ready to stop allowing terror or our enemies have a win. And in the last couple of years, I've chosen to honor the memories, the sacrifices, and the lives of those that we lost by taking actions of love, not those of fear or hate. And if you have become ready in recent years, I ask that you join me today in doing the same. Maybe this week you could volunteer. Maybe perhaps you could support a charity. There is so much to be done. There's so much to be done. People are bracing for a hurricane. There's so many people that need help or will need help. Maybe you could just perform a simple good deed in tribute to those that we lost, in the name of those that we lost, so that their lives may have meaning for years and years to come. The attacks of September 11th were intended to break our spirit. Instead, we have emerged stronger and more unified. We are more determined than ever to live our lives in freedom.
Real radio.
104.1.
Where the left and right come together for fundamental truths. AD on the radio, on Twitter at ADSXE.
Did you notice a difference today? Did you notice a difference in terms of how people seem to think or feel about it being September 11th? See, for me, it's always the same. For me, it's been the same every single day. Or every single September 11th, rather. I wake up. I remember what it was like to wake up that morning and see what had happened. Look out my window. See the smoke where the Twin Towers used to stand. I remember turning on the TV. I remember getting calls because I was supposed to be on a plane that day. It wasn't until later in the day, but my friends and family didn't know that. But they were concerned. They didn't know. They just knew I was a New Yorker that was supposed to be on a plane. So my phone didn't stop ringing. And then I remember seeing the scope, the devastation, understanding the full extent of what had happened. And like I said earlier, feeling it wash over me in waves. Feeling the weight of the human cost that our city had been through, that our country had been through, that the world had been through. And just the tears streaming down my face. Unstoppable at times. On and off all day. Trying to make some sort of sense out of something that made and never will make any sense. Confusion, desperation, all of these emotions. And for me, living in New York City at the time, that was what it was like to go through it. But I don't know. Every single September 11th, I wake up and I feel the weight of the human cost of that day. And every single September 11th, the tears come. And it's a tough day. But I did feel as though in the past couple of years, there'd been a little bit of fatigue among people. There'd been a little bit of fatigue among Americans. I think there had been certain politicians that maybe attempted to use 9/11 as a crutch. There had been enough years that elapsed to where there were people that really had no recollection of it. They were too young at the time to understand what was going on, if they were even aware of what was going on. It's been a long time. It's been 17 years. And so I sort of felt over the last several years, it remained a difficult thing for me. The tears would always come the morning of September 11th, like they did this morning. But I felt as though Americans, like I said, had grown fatigued on the emotional cost of reliving that day. But something was different today, and I don't necessarily know what it was. I felt as though I wasn't an outsider in my grief. You didn't have to be from New York City to feel, like I said, the full weight of that day. Today. It felt somehow like the significance of the loss of September 11th had returned to all of us. Did you feel that today? Maybe you were too young to remember what had happened. Maybe you were removed enough from it to where it stopped registering with you. Maybe you had done your grieving and you'd moved on. But did it all come flooding back today? Was it heavier today than it had been in past years? Because if you're like a lot of people I've spoken to about this, it was. I couldn't really pinpoint why that is. Like I said, it's difficult for me every single year. But I couldn't pinpoint exactly why America seems to be feeling September 11th in a little bit more of a visceral way today. Why today it seems like we are truly in mourning after years of having put it away for a little bit. Does that make sense? If I had to guess, I would have to say that we were doing a little bit of mourning for the state of the country. And look, this isn't a partisan political thing. This isn't saying that we are the way we are because of any political allegiance or party. But I feel like we're doing a little bit of mourning for the division, for the unity that we lost. The unity that events like September 11th can evidence. We shouldn't need them to evidence a sense of unity in us as Americans. But sometimes we don't have it until tragedy gives us the necessary perspective. And I feel as though today we might be mourning a little bit, not only for the loss of life, not only for the weight of the human cost, not only for the weight of the loss of our innocence on September 11th, 2001, but I feel as though we might be mourning the passing of American unity. And we don't have to. We can get that back. Today, maybe what you do to honor those that lost everything in September 11th. Maybe you do yourself the favor, and maybe you do America the favor of trying to reach an understanding with someone you don't understand and bring all of us closer as Americans.
For more stimulation and less irritation, 9 out of 10 doctors choose KPRC AM 950, Houston's more stimulating talk radio.
Don't get the blues, get all the news. We mean all of you guys out there in Radioland. All aboard!
He's back. AD on the radio.
Give it up, yeah. Give it up, yeah. Bring this on, come on, come on.
So, a little later on in the show, I figured we'd take a listen to the conversation that I had with Ivan Moody, the frontman of a band called Five Finger Death Punch. Controversial and an interesting figure, a guy who has recently been through an awful lot in terms of his struggles with sobriety. And I got to sit down and have a very firm and frank and fascinating discussion with a guy a little while ago, which I thought I would share with you today. We'll do that a little later on. Right now, though, there is one thing that is kind of sort of pressing, very interesting, and possibly something that could wind up affecting our lives in a much more tangible and visceral way than a lot of the other things that we talk about on the show. I mean, look, what is America obsessed with at the moment? Division. Said it before, say it all the time on this show. People are looking for things to be angry about, people are looking for a reason to be divided, people are looking to blame other people for problems in their life. And really, the petty political squabbling is an indulgence. And when moments like Harvey, this time last year, come to a city like Houston, when hurricanes or any other kind of natural disaster winds up affecting Americans and they band together in the face of things like 9/11, when Americans band together, we realize that these squabbles, these political arguments that we seem to be so obsessed with in the year 2018 are really indulgences. They're luxury items. They're things that don't really matter, that occupy an awful lot of our time. There's a high cost to them and low reward. Like I said, these petty squabbles, these petty political squabbles, they're life's luxury items because of their high cost and low return. They just make people feel good in a weird sort of way, so they expend themselves on them. They're an indulgence. But this could actually wind up affecting our day-to-day existence. I'm talking about the Senate Intelligence Committee and what's been going on with regard to tech in Washington. Jack Dorsey, CEO of Twitter, Sheryl Sandberg, COO of Facebook, and, nobody from Google. Google, like, yeah, no, we're above this. Not necessary for us to be there. But there's been all this tech talk in Washington. And you know what? The fact that Google didn't show up, that's exactly why Washington wants to sit down with the tech folks. Folks like Google think they are above government. And you know what? In many ways, they are. The taxes an organization like Google pays funds so much of what the government does. They're the ones cutting the checks. I can understand them going, no, we're not going to be, we can't be bothered to show up. We don't answer to you. We've done nothing illegal. We don't answer to you. Oh, you want to have a talk about why we've got all the money and power as opposed to you folks in politics? Well, we'll do that at our leisure. Thank you very much. So the fact that Google, in a very definite show of defiance, didn't send an executive to testify is probably exactly the sort of the reason why Washington wants to spend some time grilling tech giants. The hearing was an opportunity for tech leaders to show, hey, we've learned from past mistakes. We won't be so slow to deal with things like accusations of foreign interference during elections. Insidious bots that are in some way, shape, or form attempting to manipulate through our platform the American political process. So like I said, it was a chance for tech folks to basically get up in front of Washington and really, by proxy, America, and say, we're going to do better. But, as Google's no-show demonstrated, they weren't obligated to. But senators, they had a problem with Google not showing up. Senator Mark Warner said, I'm deeply disappointed that Google, one of the most influential digital platforms in the world, chose not to send its own leadership to engage this committee. Now, on the Facebook and Twitter front, Dorsey and Sandberg, they actually apologized, which surprised me because, well, they're sort of the ones holding the cards. I mean, the danger, I think, that they realize is there is the fact that, well, we saw it when Zuckerberg went to Washington. We saw it when Zuckerberg was raked over the coals. It was basically a bunch of angry old politicians going, what is the internet? How come this kid in the hoodie has all the money and power? We're in politics. We should have all the money and power. What's going on around here? And you know what? People with money and power, the last thing that they want you to do, well, people with power, politicians with power, the last thing that they really want is for you to get some of that. And, well, Facebook, Twitter, Google, Apple, they're all getting a little too big for their britches as far as politicians go. And there have been more and more conversations started in Washington about, well, the right thing to do with regard to these massive social media platforms and their influence over the way the world works. And it's basically, how can we get some of the power back? How can we get some control back? How can we make this our power as opposed to their power? So I think that the Facebooks and Twitters of this world recognize, hey, we have to be at least folks that seem to be playing the game. Otherwise, they could come after us and come after us hard, and that won't be fun for anyone. I think that's why they showed up. I mean, as Google demonstrated, no one was obligated to. But like I said, Sandberg and Dorsey, they made apologies. They apologized for their slow responses to Russian meddling during the 2016 elections. But they say they're getting better. They're getting better at combating, and I quote, adversaries from financially motivated troll farms to sophisticated military intelligence operations. Now, this is where it gets kind of interesting. There's a lot of people that want to regulate what's going on. There's a lot of people that want to regulate what these companies can do. That flies in the face of the free market. Hey, here's this thing that we built up from nothing. Oh man, it got really big. Twitter, Facebook, Google, these things didn't exist. We built them. You're too big. No, we got to squash you down a little bit. It's intrinsically un-American, but there seems to be this burning desire. There seems to be this burning desire in Washington to implement as many kinds of regulation with regard to social media platforms as they possibly can in the future. Now they need a reason to do that. National security, that tops the list. Data privacy, that's in there too. And Senator Mark Warner said, the era of the Wild West in social media is coming to an end. We must control it. We must stamp it out. We must rein it in. It's become big. It's become powerful. It's become something of note. It's become something that takes power away from us. Therefore, we've got to do something to control it. Now, Facebook, Twitter, Google, they want people to continue to use their platforms. And if you think that Twitter is filled with Russian bots, are you going to be as interested in participating in the Twitter experience? Probably not. So they're there, I think, to put on a show. They're there to let the world know that they're going to remain a reasonable and equitable place for people to exist. They're there to basically demonstrate to the world, you should keep using us. Washington is getting ready to attempt to squash them. Like I said, this is stuff that could genuinely affect our day-to-day existence. This is not some sort of petty indulgence of division. This is the free market being a little too free, even for people that say they love the free market, and going, how do we get some of the control back? We're getting less and less meaningful. We're getting to be more and more dinosaur-esque. Information is being shared at a rate that we don't care for it to be shared at. And we got to do something to clamp down on this. Republican representatives were all sorts of concerned that Twitter was intentionally burying conservative voices. And by the way, Twitter gets to do what the hell Twitter wants to do. They started from nothing. Twitter could be a purely lefty platform if they wanted to, but they don't want to be that. They want everybody to use the thing that they've created. But Republicans are concerned that Twitter was intentionally burying conservative voices. And Dorsey, guy who's head honcho in charge over at Twitter, said that there is, and I quote, no statistically significant difference between the number of times a tweet by a Democrat is viewed versus a tweet by a Republican. He said that they weren't failing in terms of giving equal representation to different political points of view. He did, however, say that Twitter needed to do a better and quicker job of removing fake posts or violent posts. Yeah. It's fascinating stuff. And like I said, these are the things that could genuinely affect the way your day, your life, your time on this planet plays out. Whether or not the government winds up regulating the social media platforms that you use and to what extent, that's what's trying to be decided here. And make no mistake, the government wants control over everything that they can possibly control. Left, right, up, down, doesn't matter which party we're talking about. If it's a threat to their sense of authority, to their power that they got into the game for, then they've got a problem with it. The Department of Justice announced that Jeff Sessions is going to be meeting with a few state attorneys to discuss whether tech platforms might be hurting competition and intentionally stifling the free exchange of ideas. That's an interesting spin to put on it. Are they intentionally stifling the free exchange of ideas? And I know there's tons of people that say, when Alex Jones gets banned from Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and the Apple iTunes store, or the Apple podcast platform, rather, that's the end of free speech in America. No, it's not. I mean, they've all given valid, cogent reasons for banning Alex Jones. They all said he participated in hate speech and had multiple strikes against him. I think it was. I don't know. I don't know what Alex Jones is purported to have said. And guess what? They didn't have to justify it. They didn't even have to say it was hate speech. They could have said, and they didn't want to because, well, they want people to use their platforms. They could have said, no, we just didn't like the guy, so we decided to get rid of him. Didn't want to be a part of what he was shilling. Didn't want to provide him a platform for his ideas that we don't agree with. There is no reasonable expectation that these platforms that people built not that long ago be fair and or equitable. Zuckerberg built it. He gets to do with it what he wants. He's not gonna, because, he wants to appeal to everyone. But that's an interesting angle. That's an interesting angle that the government, who love to control things, are taking on this one, saying that they may be hurting competition and intentionally stifling the free exchange of ideas. Huh.
Sometimes you just know you're done. You're longing for that shining sun. You walk these streets most every day. You're waiting to get washed away.
Now, more AD on the radio.
Back once again, the ill behavior, delivering and giving you my musical savior. Back once again, it's your boy AD, and can't nobody rock a body better than me. Back once again, the ill behavior, delivering and giving you a musical savior. Back once again, it's your boy AD, and can't nobody rock a body better than me.
So you and I will take a listen to the conversation I had with Ivan Moody of Five Finger Death Punch a little later on. We'll talk about his battle for his sobriety. We'll talk a little bit about his humble beginnings, and we'll talk about why he and the rest of Five Finger Death Punch are such ardent supporters of our military. However, we would be remiss if we did not mention what had happened on the talk today. The 9th season of the talk premiered yesterday, with probably the worst timing imaginable. Only because, well, who's co-host Julie Chen's husband? Les Moonves, who was just forced out as head of CBS this past Sunday, just gone by, as part of the Me Too movement. Everyone everyone was saying, hey, will Julie Chen be part of the return of the talk when it comes back? And thinking was she had to, otherwise it would look really, really weird. Well, apparently weird was weird enough to keep her away from the whole situation. Have a listen to this.
It's a kind of very bittersweet day for a season 9. Yay! And we're about to talk about something that affects everybody's lives here at CBS. And I've never been nervous in my life, but I'm kind of very nervous right now. As you all know, Julie's husband is in the news. And she's taking off time to be with her family.
Sharon Osbourne also went on to say that she thinks that Les Moonves has a problem and that they're all worried about their jobs if the new head of CBS comes in and fires people.
Whatever times I've had of hardship over the last 8 years, Julie has always been there for me. She's been a friend. She's somebody who I admire and respect greatly. And it's very embarrassing and upsetting to have to talk about our husband, but we feel it's right. I personally knew Les Moonves in a superficial way. It was, hello, how are you? Nothing more. I know nothing about the man other than he's Julie's husband, and he was the head of the biggest network in the world, the most powerful man in TV. I was asked a couple of months ago to make a statement supporting Leslie, which I felt I was as diplomatic as I could be with the statement that I made. But now, after 7 more women have come out, the stories are so similar, the pattern is so similar, that for me, he's not been convicted of any crime, but obviously the man has a problem. I like to say that Mr. Moonves has stepped down, and Mr. Moonves is an extremely wealthy man. And good luck to him for being a wealthy man. He's worked hard. He made this network #1. However, when a new regime comes into a company, we all know they sweep clean. Everybody here at CBS is nervous about their jobs. Yes, the ladies at this table will go on and we'll probably find another show if our show, please God, it's not taken off. We'll always find another job. And nobody's in that position yet. It's just historically when somebody new comes in, things change. And I care about the producers, I care about the crew, I care about, as Mr. Moonves would say, the little people. And that's who I care about.
Well, here's the thing. Les Moonves, he's going to be just fine. He will not be reduced to being one of the little people, even though he's been divested of his job and ostensibly the power that he's amassed over the years. CBS could pay, you're fired, but here's how much you're going to get. CBS could pay former CEO Les Moonves $120 million in severance. Yeah, he could get paid $120 million in severance. Or, interestingly enough, he could get nothing. I mean, he's going to be fine. He's got, well, an amount of money that means he'll never have to do anything again for the rest of his life if he doesn't want to. But, like I said, CBS could pay former CEO Les Moonves $120 million in severance, or he could get zip zing nada. And this is why. See, if CBS's internal investigation into allegations of sexual misconduct against Moonves failed to provide grounds for his dismissal, he gets $120 million. But Moonves stepped down from his post at CBS, where he'd been for over 20 years, following these numerous allegations of sexual misconduct against him. He stepped down. The kitchen got too hot. And, well, before accusers came forward and CBS launched its own investigation into the claims, he was making a pretty penny, $70 million a year in cash and stock. Yeah, Les Moonves was making nearly $70 million a year in cash and stock. And now the CBS board will decide on Moonves' severance package or lack thereof no later than January 31st. I think a lot of people were especially taken with the headline when they heard that a minimum, I think it was a minimum of $20 million was going to be paid to some sort of female advocacy charity, some sort of charity that was demonstrative of his reticence, if not an admission of guilt. Does that make sense? Sort of the way Billy Bush attempted to curry favor after getting caught on Donald Trump's tape. He was like, I can't believe this. I can't believe this. He's president of these United States of America and I can't get a job. What do I do? What do I do? And Billy Bush donated millions upon millions of dollars to some organization. I can't remember what it was, but it was supposed to be a repentance, I know what I did was wrong type of payment that was supposed to help him regain the public's confidence, and it did no such thing. Les Moonves was going to make a $20 million payment, and everyone went, ooh, and then they heard that his whole payout was going to be $120 million, and they went, nah, not that significant. And then they went, hold on, he was making $70 million a year? What the hell is the point of anything?
Leave the stimulation to the professionals.
Everyone is so smart.
KPRC, more stimulating talk radio.
There's something happening here, and you should know what it is. The dumbing up of America. Now, more AD on the radio.
So you and I will take a listen to the conversation I had backstage at a Five Finger Death Punch show with their legendary frontman Ivan Moody in just a little bit. He was frank, he was honest about things like addiction and his humble beginnings, and it was an interesting and an illuminating chat. We'll get into it shortly after Five Finger Death Punch's take on the Bad Company classic, Bad Company.
A destiny, oh, it's the rising sun. I was born, a shotgun in my hands, behind the gun, I'll make my final stand, yeah, and that's why they call me Bad Company, I can't deny.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, I am lucky enough to be joined by, I'm going to call you the immortal Ivan from Five Finger Death Punch. You just keep coming back. How are you?
I guess I'm back from the dead. Thank you very much. So I'm doing it. I don't know about lucky enough, by the way. It's just good to see you.
It's good to see you too. And well, I mean, the first thing you said when we talked was like, "Hey, man, thank you for not giving up on me." And you know, it seems like immediately you come from a place of a lot of humility.
I mean, absolutely. I grew up in a really blue-collar family. You know, we had scraps to eat and clothes that were recycled. So I've never lost that. And I think that was a lot of what had to do with me being intoxicated all the time. I had a case of the why me's. You know, like, why do I have all this and all these people don't? And I kind of had to flip the switch on it and learn that it's more like, why not? You know, if I don't do it, somebody else will. And it just started having such an effect on everything from anybody who's gone through an addiction of any sort knows, you know, it affects your family, your friends. In my case, you know, my band, the fans. I mean, so once I made that step and I turned into the green, I call it, I just decided, you know, I don't want that to be my legacy. I truly don't, man. Too many guys have fallen to that in this industry, and it's just not cool anymore.
So you're saying that part of the problem for you was sort of feeling like perhaps you were worth all the success that you've experienced?
I mean, yeah. Again, like I said, I still have a problem with it. You know, I'm a humble cat, at least I consider myself to be, and I've never gotten to the diva rock star crap that goes along with this job. But again, if somebody's in your ear telling you you're godly every day, you start to believe it. And luckily, my body did not believe it and shut down on me and said, dude, we can't do this anymore. But more than that, it's just refreshing, man. It's so good to be alive. I'm experiencing things I didn't before. Today I was just walking around here, and SoCal is just so pretty, man. It's got so many things to look at, women included. So, I'm really happy that I made the turn I did, and I do appreciate you not giving up on me, because it would have been easy for everybody to turn their heads. I mean, there's always somebody that could take my space, but I'm really proud of the fact that I'm still here, and you're here next to me. So
yeah, no, you absolutely should be, and I think so. It's an interesting contradiction. I've heard a lot of people who have said, "Why not me?" and maybe go down a route like that, but the idea of saying why me, and I might not be worthy, or I might not be, that's a very different perspective, and it's an interesting one for sure. You say that you grew up sort of living in secondhand clothes and really sort of scraping for things. If you had to pick one moment, maybe it was a record, or maybe it was a television appearance, or a show that you saw, or a song that you heard on the radio that made you go, music is it for me. I have to do music. What do you suppose that might have been that took you from your sort of your humble beginnings to you having to do a reality check where you go, people keep telling me I'm a god. I'm not a god, at least I don't think. What would that moment be that made music a must for you?
I can actually remember it. I was a kid, very Lone Star, didn't have a lot of friends or anything. But my Uncle Tom, he was big into music. He's a jazz musician, country. And for Christmas one year, he had bought me a Men at Work album, Business as Usual. Sure. And he bought me Styx, Kilroy was here. And I had the harmonies on that album with Dennis DeYoung and Tommy Shaw. Not just that, but it was like a comic book. Yeah. If you read, there was a storyline to it, and there was just so much going on, and that opened me up to like Pink Floyd, and then eventually, things like Def Leppard, Hysteria. It had women, that whole comic there, and so since I was such a comic geek, I just liked the storylines to it, and music to me has always been universal, whether I was happy, sad, mad, or indifferent, just like anyone else. It spoke to me in volumes that people couldn't, and it just grabbed a part of my soul that I couldn't let go of. And I knew that I had to accomplish at least something involving it. My spirit. I'm not a really religious guy, but I'm very spiritual. And my spirit turned for the better at that point. And it didn't matter the clothes on my back or the car that my mom drove or how much food we had on the table. Everything was okay, and music gave me a bigger picture. And so that's why I fell into it.
Wow, that's incredible. And do you remember the first time? I mean, look, anybody that knows you or has been to one of your shows knows you treat playing live like a competitive sport, and you're there, and you are there to win. And that comes from an interesting place. I think Lemmy from Motorhead once said, there's really nothing better and nothing like that feeling of breaking through to people when you're playing your music to them. Do you remember the first time that ever happened to you?
I mean, I remember a lot of times, growing up, I used to play in bars in Colorado, and I'd sing, and I was like 16 and 17 years old, so they kicked me out right after I was done. So I'd sit in the parking lot and listen to the other local bands, for battle bands and stuff, and check out what they had to do. I mean, the competitive nature of it came when I started realizing that if I wasn't going to be successful in this, then there was no reason to do it. And I think one of the coolest things for me is getting on stage. Everybody thinks it's like headlining. For me, it's actually going on before another band, because I want to make them work their ass off. Come get it. And that's always been my theory. So headlining's fun. I love it. We've earned it. But like tonight, we're playing before Benjamin, and I love that. I get to walk by Ben and go, good luck. But yeah, bands like Pantera, and especially Pantera, when they got on, you just knew it was going. There was no going back for it at that point.
Dude, when I was a kid, one of my first real metal shows was, I grew up in London, and I went to see Megadeth at the Hammersmith Odeon when I was in about the 6th grade, and Pantera was opening, and it was just, nobody had seen anything like it before. It wasn't the first time they'd been there, but it was the first time a lot of us had seen them, and there was this one moment where Phil Anselmo said, so we're the support band, and everybody just knew that they'd owned the night. And it definitely gets
it's that cool, isn't it? And it just gives you chills. I mean, the fans want to see that, I think. They want to know that you're up there giving everything you have, and the reception is so much better if you acknowledge the fact that they're people. These people work so hard for these tickets, man. You and I know it. When I went to a concert when I was a kid, I remember actually a story like yours, Pantera and Typo Negative were playing in the Springs. I worked for 3 months to get tickets. And I mean, I did landscaping, I was doing chores around the house, anything I could to get 2 Pantera tickets. And I remember how special it was. Right before they came on stage, all the lights went down, and I want people to experience that with us. I think they deserve it, and I'm glad to be in a position where I can somewhat give it to them.
No, you absolutely.
Pantera, but I mean, who will? So.
Well, no, that's definitely a tough road to hoe. But you know what? It's I think in terms of that, you're shooting for the moon and landing amongst the stars. If you make the guys in Pantera sort of, if you recognize the fact that it took months of mowing lawns to go see that and bear that in mind every single night you step on stage, I think it has a lot to do with your success and why your fans are so unbelievably dedicated. You are here in a military town, and you know it's Five Finger Death Punch has almost become synonymous with the military and your support for the military. Where would you say that comes from? I mean, obviously, it's an amazing thing to do, and it's the right thing to do, but there's a lot of bands that don't necessarily have that degree of passion, and you've definitely picked that, it would seem, as your cause. Where do you suppose that comes from for you guys?
I mean, there's no second thought to it. You know, Zoltan, growing up in Hungary, his mother was in the Air Force, so he was raised basically as a military baby in a communist country. So that's something to sink into right there. For me, my entire family, I mean, seriously, besides my brother, all enlisted. You know, I had 4 uncles that were Army, I had 2 aunts that were Navy. 1 aunt that was a Marine, and I had 3. My grandfather on one side was Army, my grandfather on the other was Marine. I just grew up with that spirit, and I watched the terror that they went through when they came home. And my grandfather on my mom's side went to 2 different wars. He got sent home by friendly fire. And just hearing his stories and seeing, I respected him on so many levels, and just knowing that he almost gave his life to make sure that his grandkids, me and his wife, my grandmother, could live a better life. And so I've always seen that as a reality. It's something I can't overlook. And so I'm really proud that Zoe and I have done so much and continue to do so much, because too many bands out there talk the talk and they don't walk the walk. Like, they'll go on stage with a flag or something and go, "Oh yeah, hoorah, we're really for the military, you go guys," and they have no idea what they're talking about. For me, it's not just saying something, it's making sure they know that we're serious, we absolutely respect and love them for what they've done. And yeah, that's that. Long answer to a short question.
No, it's a good answer. Only, I mean, you know, being from a military family, it's not just our veterans, it's not just our active duty that make sacrifices, it's all their families. So you've been right there on the front line in your own way as a family member of these folks, making sacrifices for yourself. And it's amazing. Like, my grandfather was a naval aviator in the Second World War. Nice. Shot down behind enemy lines at Iwo Jima. Never really talked about it, but like, you know, I know you. No. Like, what one grandfather was at, the other grandfather was British intelligence and stormed the beach at Normandy. And like, I find that generally speaking, they've got a lot to talk about. They've got amazing stories. They've got all this pride that they deserve to have, and this is what I love about bands like you that do things like this. There's a lot of these guys and women that are so unbelievably humble and so backward in coming forward, and sometimes it takes, don't take this the wrong way, a professional big mouth like yourself to draw the right sort of attention to that kind of cause. So thank you for being part of it, and thank you for, in your own way, your service, and thank you for doing for those that are part of our service.
Oh, man, I'm in awe right now. That's fantastic, dude. I want to sit with you and actually talk about that in detail. I couldn't even imagine it. That's the other part of it. Like, most people, they hear a story like that, but my God, you grew up in that family. Yeah. Just sitting there looking in your grandfather's eye and going, wow. I mean, that's real deal. So that's a crazy. I grew up in Compton. Oh, well, whatever. Yeah. You haven't seen the Stripes. So
my grandfather had one engine shot out and tried to land on an aircraft carrier, but could only turn in one direction because he had one engine in the middle of the South Pacific. And like, never talked about it. Came back home, took a job as an engineer, built a house with his own hands, and it's like it's a crazy thing that a lot of these guys go through. And like I said, so many of them either don't want to talk about it, but are too humble.
Sorry to interrupt you, but can you imagine when he finally landed, or the fact that he figured out up there that he only had one engine, and he figured out a way to keep looping until he was safe. And then the second he hit that ground, I just got goosebumps. Imagine what he thought when he jumped out of that plane and was like, thank God I didn't, and then coming home like it's no big thing and be like, hey, you want to go to Chuck E. Cheese? Like, you cool?
Let's go to a ball game.
It's so insane. So much respect, man. It's crazy.
Well, dude, this has been an awesome chat. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for what you do, not only for your fans, but thank you so much for what you do for the members of our armed services. Thank you. You're awesome.
Thanks for not giving up on me, people. I love you, man. We'll see you tonight.